Out here, in the vast and unforgiving wilderness, the night is not your only enemy. The trees whisper secrets, the wind carries voices that do not belong, and sometimes, something watches from the darkness. You think you're alone, but you're not. You think you hear a coyote, but it's not. You think you see a friend stepping out of the shadows, but it is not your friend. Tonight, we bring you 4 terrifying encounters with the Skinwalker, an entity of legend, a shapeshifter lurking just beyond the light of your campfire. If you ever find yourself camping in the wild and hear something call your name, run. But for now, sit tight and listen closely to these chilling tales of the unknown. Story 1. The Imitator. The deep woods are full of sounds. Some are familiar, the rustling of leaves, the snap of a twig underfoot, the distant call of an owl. Others are not. The arrival Daniel, Melissa, Jake and Olivia had planned this trip for months. A weekend escape from the city, away from the endless hum of traffic and the glow of screens. The idea was simple. Find a secluded spot deep in the forest, set up camp by the lake, and enjoy the quiet. The first day was perfect. They hiked for miles, following an old, rarely used trail until they reached a clearing. The lake stretched out before them like a black mirror, reflecting the sky. No signs of other campers, no signs of civilization. Exactly what they wanted. As the sun set, they built a fire. Stories were told, jokes were shared, and for a moment everything felt right. But then the forest grew silent. Too silent. The usual sounds of crickets, distant rustling, and the occasional hoot of an owl. All gone. Jake was the first to notice. "Do you guys hear that?" he asked, staring into the trees. "Hear what?" Olivia chuckled. "There's nothing." "Exactly," Jake muttered. Melissa shrugged it off. "The woods get quiet sometimes, right? No big deal." But as the firelight flickered against the trees, she felt something wrong, like the darkness itself was watching. Then they heard it, a voice, distant, faint. "Help me," the voice. It was soft, almost carried away by the wind, but it was clear enough to send a chill through all of them. Daniel stood up. "Did you hear that?" Olivia frowned. "Yeah, it sounded like, 'Help me,'" the voice again. Closer, a little clearer this time. Melissa grabbed Daniel's arm. "Someone's out there." Jake reached for the flashlight and pointed it toward the tree line. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating nothing but dense trees and empty space. "Hello," Daniel called. "Is someone there?" Silence. Then, her footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching the leaves just beyond the reach of the flashlight. The voice came again. This time, it was unmistakable. "Melissa, help me." The blood drained from her face. "No, no, no, no," she whispered. Because that voice, it was her own. The imitation. Jake turned the flashlight toward her, confusion in his eyes. "Melissa, was that?" She shook her head violently. "That wasn't me." Daniel's breath hitched. "It sounded just like you." The group froze. The fire crackled, but beyond its glow, the woods remained still. Then the voice called again. "Jake, help me." They all turned toward the trees. "Nope, nope, we are not doing this." Olivia snapped, grabbing her bag. Melissa's hands were shaking. "We have to go, now." "It could be someone messing with us," Daniel reasoned, though his voice wavered. "A hiker, lost." "That wasn't a hiker," Melissa hissed. "That was my voice. My exact voice. That's not possible." Then came the laughter, not loud, not human, a dry, rasping chuckle, like a throat that had forgotten how to laugh. And then, the footsteps. Fast, rushing toward them from the trees. The Sakasi escaped. Jake dropped the flashlight in panic, and the beam spun wildly. In that brief flicker of movement, Melissa saw it. A shape, tall and wrong, stepping just inside the light before vanishing again. Its limbs bent at unnatural angles. Its face, stolen because it was hers, her own reflection staring back at her from the darkness. She screamed, Daniel grabbed her wrist and yanked her toward the car. Olivia and Jake were already running. Behind them, the laughter turned to a guttural snarl. The footsteps followed. Fast, too fast. They ran without looking back. The trees blurred past them. The only goal was the car. The only thought was escape. Melissa could feel it behind them, closing in. Breathing, whispers of her own voice mocking her. "Melissa, help me." Then, suddenly, silence. The aftermath. They reached the car, tumbled inside, and locked the doors. The headlights cut through the darkness. There was nothing, just trees, just empty space, but they felt it, watching, waiting. No one spoke as they sped down the dirt road, away from the campsite, away from whatever had been imitating them. They never returned. Months later, Melissa found an online forum about strange encounters in the woods. She read through countless stories, dismissing most as folklore, until she found one that chilled her to the bone. A story about something in the wilderness that mimicked voices, something that called people by name, something that wore the faces of those who heard it, and at the end of the post, a final warning. If you hear your own voice calling to you from the dark, do not answer. Before we continue, a warning. The stories you are about to hear are not for the faint of heart. They are whispers from the darkness, echoes of things best left forgotten. But if you crave the unknown, if you seek the truth hidden in the shadows, then join us. Like this video and subscribe to the channel. It may seem like a simple action, but in the realm of the unknown, every choice matters. And tonight, you might just wish you had stayed in the light. Story 2. The Stranger by the Fire camping trips were supposed to be about escape, about leaving behind the weight of reality and immersing yourself in nature. That's what we thought when we planned our weekend getaway deep in the forests of Utah. There were 4 of us, Ben, Sarah, Matt and me, Ethan. We had picked a secluded spot near a stream, far from any designated camping grounds. The kind of place where no one would bother us. The first day was peaceful. We set up our tents, cooked over an open fire, and laughed under the vast, star-filled sky. Everything felt normal, safe. But that sense of security wouldn't last. Around midnight, as we sat around the fire telling stories, the air grew unnaturally still. No crickets, no wind, just silence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears, making you aware of your own heartbeat. Then we heard it. Footsteps. They weren't coming from the path we had taken, but from the dense woods behind us. Slow, deliberate steps. Crushing dried leaves. We exchanged uneasy glances. Probably an animal, Ben whispered, but animals didn't walk like that. Then a voice called out, "Mind if I join you?" We turned at the same time, and there, just beyond the glow of the fire, stood a man. At least he looked like a man. Tall, thin, his clothes were all wrong, like he had stepped out of a different decade. A tattered flannel shirt, jeans that looked unnaturally clean, bare feet caked in dirt. His face was shadowed, but I could tell something was off. His features didn't seem to fit together, like they had been put together in a rush, just close enough to pass for human if you didn't look too hard. Matt cleared his throat. Sure, man. You lost or something?" The stranger didn't answer. He just walked forward and sat down next to the fire without waiting for permission. None of us knew what to say. It was like an unspoken agreement. We couldn't just tell him to leave. There was something about him, something wrong. But we didn't want to provoke him. The fire crackled between us, casting flickering shadows across his face. That's when I noticed it. His eyes too dark, too deep, like looking into something that wasn't supposed to be there. Then he started talking. Not about himself, not about where he came from, just stories. But they weren't like any campfire, stories I'd ever heard. He spoke about the things that live in the woods, creatures that wear our faces, creatures that wait for the right moment to replace us. "The woods don't belong to us," he murmured, staring into the fire. "They never have. You can hear them sometimes if you listen." A long pause. Then he smiled. Have you ever heard something that sounded human, but wasn't? Nobody spoke. The fire flickered. The shadows around us seemed to stretch like they were listening too. Then he laughed, a dry, raspy sound that sent a chill down my spine. Guess you kids are lucky. And just like that, he stood up. No one moved as he stepped, away from the fire. Then without a sound, he turned and walked back into the woods. Not a single branch cracked under his feet. No rustling, nothing. He just vanished into the trees. We sat there, too afraid to speak. The night stretched on, and sleep never came. But the worst part? The next morning, when we packed up to leave, we noticed something. Footprints. Hundreds of them surrounding our campsite. Some were ours, but most of them weren't. And all of them were barefoot. The mistake, we should have left immediately. But we hesitated. Maybe it was just paranoia. Maybe we were letting our imaginations get the best of us. Ben was the first to shake it off. Let's eat before we head out, he said. We barely slept. I need something in my system before we hike back, so we built another fire, a mistake. Halfway through our meal, Sarah froze. Did you hear that? She whispered. At first we didn't, but then a low, garbled voice, like someone was trying to speak but couldn't. The sound came from the trees, the same direction the man had walked into. Then we saw him. At least, we thought it was him. But his posture was wrong. Hunched, too stiff, like his joints didn't bend properly. And his face, his mouth hung open as if mid-sentence, but no words came out. Just that low, garbled sound. Then he moved. Not a step, not a walk. A sudden jerking lurch forward. Ben screamed. We all did. We grabbed whatever we could, our bags, our gear, and ran. The forest was a blur, branches slashing at our arms, our legs. The sound of something behind us, something fast, something unnatural. By the time we saw the road, we weren't sure if it was even real. But we didn't stop until we collapsed near the car. When we finally dared to look back, there was nothing. No strange man, no footprints, no sign that anyone had been there. But as we drove away, leaving the forest behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't actually escaped, and that somewhere deep in the woods, something still wore that man's face. Story 3, the thing that repeated my voice. We should have left when we had the chance. It started as a joke, a challenge, something to test our courage. I had gone camping with my cousin Jake and our friend Daniel, deep in the Appalachian wilderness. No cell service, no distractions, just 3 guys, a tent, and a fire. Jake was the one who brought up the stories. This area has a lot of weird disappearances, you know, he said, poking at the fire with a stick. People hear voices at night. Voices that sound just like someone they know. Daniel snorted. Right, like an echo or something? Jake shook his head. No, like something that's trying to sound human but doesn't quite get it right. We laughed it off. Just another scary story. But I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling. The forest was too quiet. No wind, no animals. As if everything was listening. That night, after we crawled into our sleeping bags, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. They weren't loud, just the soft crunch of leaves outside the tent. I held my breath, listened. Then, Ethan. It was Jake's voice, whispering my name. I turned, over heart pounding. Jake? He was right next to me, fast asleep. Ethan. It came from outside, a perfect replica of his voice, but flat, emotionless, like someone reading a script. I reached out and shook Jake awake. He groaned. What? Shh, I whispered. Someone's outside, Daniel stirred. What are you guys whispering about? Then we heard it again. Ethan, come here. It was my own voice this time. Daniel sat up straight. What the? Shut up, I hissed. Something moved outside the tent. A slow, deliberate dragging sound. Not footsteps, something heavier. Jake unzipped the tent just a fraction of an inch, just enough to see. He went completely still. Then he zipped it back up. Fast. What? I whispered. His face was pale. There's someone out there. Who? Daniel asked. Jake swallowed. I don't know. We sat in silence, listening. The dragging sound stopped. Then came the worst part. Let me in. A voice, identical to mine, whispered right outside the tent. Daniel let out a strangled gasp. Nope. Nope. No way. I felt frozen, because I knew it wasn't me, and yet it was. Then we heard laughter. Not normal laughter. It was wrong. Choppy. Like someone was imitating laughter but didn't quite understand how it worked. It went on for far too long. Then silence. We didn't sleep the rest of the night. The second mistake. By morning, we convinced ourselves it had been a prank. Maybe some other campers messing with us. Let's just pack up and get the hell out of here, Jake muttered. But as we left the tent, Daniel froze. He was staring at the dirt. There were tracks all around our campsite, bare feet, dozens of them. But the strangest part, they all led to our tent, but none led away. That was when I knew it was still here, watching, waiting. We packed fast. No talking, no joking, just pure, primal fear. We hiked in silence for hours, trying to get back to the car. But something felt off. The trees looked different. The path felt wrong. At one point, Jake whispered, I think we're going in circles. Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead. That's not possible. We followed the same trail in. We should have known then. We were being led. The final warning as the sun started to set, we reached a clearing with an old, abandoned cabin. It shouldn't have been there. The wood was rotting, the windows broken, but the door was slightly open, and then we saw them, 3 figures standing just inside the doorway. They looked exactly like us. I don't mean similar, I mean identical. Same clothes, same faces, same everything, except their mouths were too wide, their eyes too black. Then, all at once, they spoke. Ethan, Jake, Daniel. Their voices layered over each other, a horrible chorus of our own voices. Daniel screamed. We ran. Branches slashed at our skin. Roots tried to trip us, but we didn't stop. The air felt thick, suffocating, like we were running through something alive. Then we saw the road. The car was there, right where we left it. We threw ourselves inside, locking the doors, gasping for breath. But as we peeled out of there, tires. Kicking up gravel, I made the mistake of looking back. The 3 figures stood at the edge of the trees, watching, smiling, and then, as we drove away, they waved. Story 4, The Hollow One. It started with a bet. I dare you to sleep alone. That was how we ended up deep in the woods, miles away from civilization, in the middle of Skinwalker territory. There were 4 of us. Mark, Olivia, Tyler, and me. We were seasoned campers, always chasing the next thrill. But this time, something felt different. The moment we set up camp, I noticed it. The silence, no birds, no rustling leaves. Even the wind refused to move. The air was thick, heavy, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. I should have listened to my gut. The challenge mark was the one who made the bet. One of us stays outside the tent all night. No flashlight, no phone, just the fire. Tyler laughed. Easy, I'll do it. But Olivia shook her head. Bad idea. You don't joke about stuff like this out here. Mark smirked. Come on, Liv. You scared? She didn't answer, but the way her hands tightened around her arms told me she was. Tyler, being the idiot he was, accepted the challenge anyway. Fine, I'll prove there's nothing out here but trees. The first sign, the fire crackled as we climbed into the tent, leaving Tyler outside with nothing but a knife and his arrogance. For a while, everything was quiet. I could hear him humming to himself, tossing sticks into the flames. Then, around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of whispers. I held my breath, straining to listen. It wasn't clear at first, just a low rhythmic murmur like a song without words. Then I heard Tyler's voice. "Guys?" It was barely above a whisper. "Guys, please come out." Something about his tone was wrong. Flat, hollow. Olivia stirred. "What's he doing?" Mark groaned, annoyed. "Dude, go to sleep." Silence. Then we heard it, a knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the tent fabric, then another and another. My blood ran cold. "Guys!" It was Tyler's voice again, but this time it came from inside the tent. We all froze. Mark, Olivia, and I were packed tightly together. There was no space for anyone else, and yet the voice was right there with us. The second Tyler Mark unzipped the tent just an inch, just enough to see outside, then he slammed it shut. "That's not Tyler," he whispered. I swallowed. "What?" His face was pale, his hands shaking. "There are 2 of him." I felt my stomach drop. Olivia clapped a hand over her mouth, eyes wide. We listened. Outside, Tyler sat by the fire, completely still, his back to us. Inside the tent, something breathed. "Guys, please." The voice was right behind me. I turned. Slowly. Nothing was there. I scrambled for my flashlight, clicking it on. The moment the light filled the tent, the voice stopped, and outside, Tyler was gone. The hollow 1 Mark ripped open the tent. The fire still burned, casting eerie shadows against the trees, but the woods were empty. No footsteps, no broken branches. Tyler had vanished. Then Olivia pointed. "Oh my God!" At the edge of the firelight, something watched us. It looked like Tyler, same clothes, same height, but its face was wrong. The eyes were too large, the mouth too wide, stretching in an unnatural grin. It stood perfectly still. Then it spoke. "It's so dark out here. Come closer." The voice was almost right. Almost. But there was something off. A delay, like it was struggling to form words. Mark grabbed Olivia's wrist. "Run!" We bolted. Branches scraped our skin. The cold air burned our lungs, but we never stopped. Behind us, the thing laughed, not a normal laugh. A warped, uneven sound, as if it had just learned what laughter was. We ran for hours, deeper into the woods, blindly searching for the road, but no matter how far we went, we could still hear it. "It's so dark out here. Come closer." The voice echoed between the trees, shifting directions, circling us. At some point, Olivia collapsed, gasping. "We're lost. We're so lost." Mark shook his head, panic setting in. "No, it's leading us somewhere." And then we saw it, a second campsite, identical to ours. Same fire pit, same tent, same 3 sleeping bags inside, and in front of the fire, Tyler, or something wearing his skin. It turned its head, slowly, its grin stretching wider. "You made it." The final escape. Mark grabbed Olivia, yanking her backward. "Run, now!" We didn't stop. We ran until the sun rose, bursting through the trees like a savior. And then, finally, we saw the road. Our car was there, right where we left it. We threw ourselves inside, locking the doors. Mark turned the key. The engine roared to life, and as we peeled out onto the road, I made the mistake of looking in the rearview mirror. Tyler, or what looked like him, stood at the tree line, watching, smiling. And just before we disappeared around the bend, it waved. If you ever find yourself in the woods, remember this. Never whistle at night, never answer a voice calling your name, and never, ever look too closely at something that shouldn't be there. The legends of the Skinwalker are warnings, not myths. Now tell me, have you ever experienced something unexplainable while camping? If so, share your story in the comments below. And if you made it to the end of this video, type "They Walk Among Us" in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because in the world of the unknown, the next story could be yours.